Before we get into this one, if you could just hit that subscribe button down below, that would mean a massive amount to me. We're trying to hit 3K as soon as we can, so any subs will be massively appreciated. Let's get into the video though. So today's video is one I promised yesterday in my Calvin Phillips video, and it is a chat about Mo Kamara, who plays for RB Salzburg. And if he were to sign, he would be the third player in one transfer window we'd signed from the same club, which must be some sort of record. But him and Tyler Adams, I have already done a video on Tyler Adams, so if you want to check that one out, that will be in the cards up there. So let's look at Kamara then, because he seems to be the other option that's high up on Orta's list. Tyler Adams and Mo Kamara, and they're both from Red Bull clubs. So today's video is a video in which I'm actually going to compare Mo Kamara's statistics, or 4 key statistics that I think are good for a holding midfielder, and I'm going to compare them to the statistics of Calvin Phillips. Now, there are some caveats before we get into this bit. The first one is I'm going to explain what percentiles are. Now, a lot of you may know what they are, but if you don't, I am just explaining this for those people. So a percentile, this is the way it works in terms of this football stats-based percentiles. So if a player is in the 99th percentile, that is comparing him to, especially for this specific case, if he's in the 99th percentile, that is comparing him to all other midfielders in the top 5 leagues in the last 365 days over the same amount of minutes as they've played. So for example, Phillips has played something like 1,500 minutes, so his statistics are compared over 1,500 minutes to all those other players, regardless of how many minutes those players have played. Mo Kamara has played 669 minutes, so he's compared over 669 minutes. So you're not basically comparing somebody who's played 600 minutes to somebody who's played 1,500 minutes, because it wouldn't be a fair comparison, would it? So obviously that other player would have had much more game time to get that in, so that's why it's done the way it's done. Now, the actual percentiles themselves, if Mo Kamara, say, is in the 99th percentile, that means only 1% of players in Europe who play in midfield in the top 5 leagues are better than him in that statistic. If he's in the first percentile, it means that 99% of all midfielders in the top 5 leagues compared against that statistic are better than him. Now, I hope that helps. You may have to rewatch that a few times, because that was a lot of jibber jabber, and even I recognise that. So there are definitions online as well that you can look at, but for the purposes of the video, that's how I've described it. So let's actually have a look at the statistics then. There are 4 statistics in which I'm going to compare Calvin Phillips and Mo Kamara in today's video. Number 1, tackles. Number 2, interceptions. Number 3, progressive passes. And number 4, progressive carries. Now, I think these are good statistics to get an idea of what sort of holding midfielder a holding midfielder is, if that makes sense to you. So let's first have a look at tackles. Now, Calvin Phillips comes in with 3.67 tackles per 90, which puts him in the 97th percentile. So like we said before, only 3% of players in Europe in the top 5 leagues as midfielders have made more tackles than Calvin Phillips. Kamara, he's not as good, but he's still very good, because he's got 2.96 per 90, and that puts him in the 82nd percentile. So although Phillips is tackling more, Kamara is still up there in the top 20% of all midfielders in Europe in the top 5 leagues for tackles as a midfielder. So that's still a pretty good statistic, especially when you consider he's only 22 years old. Interceptions next. Calvin Phillips, 1.92 interceptions per 90 minutes, which puts him in the 65th percentile. Mo Kamara, though, 2.29 interceptions per 90 in the 85th percentile. Now, the reason I chose these two statistics, easy for me to say, these 2 statistics for these 2 players is because they'll be playing under Jesse Marsch. And Jesse Marsch, he's all about transition. So tackles and interceptions are a really, really key part of what he needs his holding midfielders to do, because when a player makes an interception or a tackle in our team, the idea is to go straight towards goal as fast as possible and work in transition, and basically, in layman's terms, on the counter-attack. Or counter-pressing as well, which is almost countering a counter-attack. So that's why I've chosen those two statistics. I can't even speak today. It's hard to say statistics. For me, anyway. Don't know about you. Progressive passes and progressive carries then. Well, progressive passes, if you've watched the channel before, you'll know, is a pass that goes 10 yards further towards the opposition goal than the previous 6 passes of a move. So if your midfielders are playing around with it on the centre circle and they've passed it back and forth and sideways and not gone very far with it, if then the ball rolls to Kamara or Kalvin Phillips and they hit it 10 yards into the opposition half, so it could go up towards a winger, it could go up towards a striker. It's a progressive pass that pulls your team up the pitch. That's what it is, basically. So progressive passes then, it's quite important for our team, because if we are playing in transition and you want to get that ball up the pitch as fast as possible, progressive passes are a big way of doing that. So Kalvin Phillips then, 4.12 per 90, which puts him in the 55th percentile. And Kamara 4.17, so slightly better, and that puts him in the 57th percentile. Now, that may not sound great, because obviously, the way we're showing it, 45% of all midfielders are better than Kalvin and Mo in this statistic. But you've got to consider that this is compared against all midfielders. So that's also compared to people like, I don't know, Kevin De Bruyne. So Kevin De Bruyne, because he's an attacking midfielder, gets the ball into his feet and he plays those passes into the front men so much more often, because that's his role on the pitch. So this one you kind of got to take with a pinch of salt because of the position that they play in. If we were to compare them just against holding midfielders, I'm sure they'd be much higher up that list. But progressive passes, 4 and 4 in 90 minutes, it's not too bad. You don't get counter-attacked that many times in a 90 minutes, and when you do, there's not 100% chance it's going to fall to either Kamara or Kalvin Phillips, and they're going to play that pass. So those statistics are pretty respectable in that case. I don't think it's awful, and I don't think it's amazing, but I think it shows that they are willing to make those passes and willing to try and get the ball up the pitch as fast as possible. Progressive carries then, the last statistic that we're going to measure. So Phillips, 1.52 per 90, which is in the 4th percentile. So 96% of all midfielders in Europe's top 5 leagues, God, I really can't speak today, have made more progressive carries than Kalvin Phillips. He doesn't run with the ball. That's a sort of thing that we can take from that. We know that Kalvin Phillips doesn't really run with the ball. He prefers to let his passing do the talking. But when you compare that to Kamara, 2.69 per 90, he's in the 25th percentile, so almost 20% better than Phillips. But they are holding midfielders, and it's not that often that you do get a holding midfielder who runs through the lines completely and goes on long dribbles. But I thought it would be an interesting statistic to put in there, just because sometimes it's good to mix it up. So obviously we talked about the transition with Jesse Marsch and him wanting to get the ball up the pitch as fast as possible, but it's also good to have variations of doing that. So you have your progressive passing, he might ping a ball out wide, but other times he might fake to ping a ball out wide, and then he might break the line by actually dribbling through and then making a pass. So those progressive carries is quite an interesting thing, because it seems like from this, Kamara will be running with the ball, making dribbles into the opposition half 20% more than what Phillips did. So we could see a noticeable by eye difference in the way that they play in terms of him actually going through the lines a bit. And it's almost a bit of a similar story with Tyler Adams, who we mentioned earlier. Like I said, I've done a video on that, but he likes to carry the ball, I think, more than both of these two. So it's an interesting dynamic that either Kamara or Tyler Adams will bring a bit more of than what we had with Phillips to Elland Road next season if one of them is to sign. And the last thing is his price. So 30 to 35 million is the rumour for Kamara to be the asking price. He's 22 years old, so obviously he's got a big future ahead of him. But when we compare that to Tyler Adams, recently, well, when I made that first video, it seemed like Tyler Adams was going to be in the region of 30 to 35 million pounds. Now there's reports it could be 15 to 20 million pounds. So you could be looking at Tyler Adams as the more sensible, in terms of a financial side of things, deal. But Mo Kamara for 30 to 35 million pounds seems quite a lot when you consider that Tyler Adams is also playing in the Bundesliga rather than the Austrian Bundesliga, so it's a bit of a step up there, a bit of a step up in opposition, and he's also had the chance to play some Champions League football. Granted, Mo Kamara has as well. But it's interesting to me how that differential in prices has come out. I wouldn't have thought before it was sort of broken. I think it was Phil Hay, maybe he said it on The Athletic. I wouldn't have thought that before. I think 30 to 35 million pounds is quite a lot for a player. So that would be around 40 million euros if he was about 35 million pounds. But it looks like Leipzig are sort of prepared to allow Tyler Adams to leave because he hasn't actually been fully involved this season. Although he says that he has 24 games played this season, a lot of them have actually been off the bench. So he's not necessarily a starter there, and it probably would be an attractive proposition. A, he gets to play with Jesse Marsh, an American coach who he's played under before. And B, he gets to play with the likes of Brendan Aronson, who obviously is a compatriot that he plays for the USMNT with, US men's national team with. So it'd be an interesting proposition because he would also get first team football pretty much guaranteed every week, providing he wasn't absolutely terrible when he came in, which I can't really see happening. So for me, it's a toss-up. I'd be happy with either of these players. I really would be happy with either of them. I think they're both fantastic additions to the team. They would be. They're both around a similar height, similar build, and they both play quite similarly as well. So yeah, I honestly would be happy with either of them. But this is what I just wanted to do today, is just show you how somebody like Mo Kamara would compare to Calvin Phillips in terms of statistics. Obviously, like I say every time, because he's not coming from a top 5 league, you have to take his stats with a pinch of salt. They could decrease in the Premier League, or he could hit the ground running and absolutely smash through his old statistics. So it's really hard to say, but at least this gives you an idea of what sort of player he is, and that's what I hope to get across in these videos. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, leave a like down below, and there'll be plenty more content on the way. If you want more of me, I'll be on the Just Joe football show on the midweek fix tomorrow night. So catch me there as well, live with Joe, JT and Lewis, as we are every week now, around 8 or 8:30. So check Joe's socials to find out exactly what time. So yeah, that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Leeds Lately.